All right, excellent. Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. And I'd like to introduce Naeem. He is an entrepreneur, investor, and a startup advisor who believes in using the power of technology to improve lives and close the opportunity gap. Naeem spent his early career focusing on corporate finance, M&A, and financial analysis, first at Prudential Financial and then at Loral Space and Communications, where he helped usher the company through various capital market activities. As co-founder and CEO of Keen Home, Naeem took the high-tech startup from concept to exit, navigating the company through Techstars accelerator program, successfully appearing on ABC Shark Tank, raising over $10 million of outside capital, and scaling the company to over $4 million of revenue en route to its eventual sale. After Keen Home, Naeem co-founded and served as the CEO of autom, where he led the charge to improve the way software is developed by launching the world's first decentralized peer-to-peer function as a service platform. Most recently, Naeem was the head of both product and corporate development at ConnectM Technology Solutions, where he's responsible for delivering a world-class product, strategic direction, assessing M&A opportunities, capital allocation, and capital raising. Naeem is currently on the founding team of a stealth mode startup in the family history space. As a startup coach, mentor, and frequent guest speaker, Naeem enjoys discussing a variety of topics from fundraising to authentic leadership. We're thankful to have you join us here today, Naeem. And with that, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I actually just flew in from LA yesterday, so I'm a little bit jet lagged, but I'm super excited to be here. Anytime I can make some of my schedule available for Penn State, I'm always happy, and it's an honor for me to share my story with you guys today.
We appreciate it. Thank you again, Naeem.
My pleasure.
Please.
Yeah. So hopefully that gave you all a high level sort of 50,000 foot overview of my journey, my entire career. What I want to focus on is really my entrepreneurial journey. That's sort of the last 10 years of my career. I graduated Penn State class of 2005, right? So I was there from 01 to 05. That's me with the Nittany Lion. I think maybe a couple of years after I graduated to New York City. So I was in Smeal College of Business. I majored in finance, minored in economics, graduated, sort of went the real typical finance route, right? I worked for, as Matt mentioned, couple big corporations, right? So my corporate career really spanned for about 6 years after I graduated, right? So first I was in asset management with Prudential, great environment, lots of young kids just like me right out of school, sort of built up my first experience in a really large company. And then I shifted to more traditional corporate finance in the city. That's me in my office there on 40th and 3rd Street in Manhattan, working for a satellite technology company called Loral Space Communications. And there was actually a pretty rude wake-up call for me. So as I said, Prudential was sort of first job out of school, had my cubicle next to a bunch of other early 20-somethings. It really felt like an extension of college in a lot of ways. But this was a serious corporate finance job that I somehow landed, had like a corner office in Midtown Manhattan working with a bunch of executives at this company. And the reason I mention this, it's not entrepreneurship per se, but this job taught me a lot about both hard skills and soft skills. What do I mean about hard skills and soft skills? So from a hard skills perspective, I was the only one under probably 50 years old in that office. It was myself and the executive management team of $1 billion company, right? So it's the CEO, CFO, right? Treasurer, the general counsel, and then I was the only analyst. I started off as an analyst and I worked my way up to a finance manager, but I had to quickly learn that when you're dealing with really successful executives, you can't really BS your way through it. You have to really know what you're talking about. If you don't know what you're talking about, you say that and you go and you figure it out, and then you sort of reemerge with a perspective, right? So a lot of that process for me was, believe it or not, actually breaking out my old textbooks from school and relearning and rereading and then reapplying sort of the book knowledge and applying it to real world finance, right? The beauty of a lot of the business world is it's a very practical application. So I was running financial models, for example, of a deal that we were doing. We were buying another company for $3 billion, and I was responsible for that financial model to sort of own the analysis for that deal. And that deal ran for about a year and a half, a deal of that magnitude, right? It's pretty common. So I had to quickly get up to speed on the finance education that I learned, applying it to a real world M&A scenario. I had to quickly get up to speed on presenting, let's say, the output of that model to executives when they were looking to make certain decisions about how to finance the deal. And those both hard skills, which were the actual presentation, creating a presentation in PowerPoint, running the model in Excel, et cetera, and then presenting it and being persuasive, right? So that's what I call a soft skill, right? So understanding how to persuade someone that maybe doesn't look like you, maybe didn't grow up in the same way that you did, and is a lot older than you, getting them to take you seriously. And these are skills that I was able to apply later in my startup life that I think helped to a large part some success. There was an entrepreneurship itch that I got while I was in the corporate world, and I put that here in the form of real estate investing. So around 2008, right after the big global financial crisis, which some of you may have learned about, there was an opportunity to pick up some real estate at attractive prices. So I started doing some investing, and that really allowed me to learn something outside of my traditional corporate job and apply some of my skills and passion in just a different way. So that was sort of my first foray outside of just a 9-to-5, right, or a 9-to-9 as I was doing, and it just gave me a taste of just expanding beyond the finance world. So fast forward to 2011, right? Had a good run in the finance world. Decided to pursue my MBA. So ended up getting accepted and going to NYU Stern. I was actually the class leader there, which was a fantastic decision. It really put me in a position where I was able to meet a lot of my fellow classmates and engage with my professors and the faculty in a way that I don't think I would have had I just been a regular student, right? So my classmate Ryan there on the left, came up to me during our second year and said, "Hey, I had this idea for this smart home technology where I can control airflow in my home with my phone." And this was back in 2012. "Do you want to enter this business plan competition with me?" I said, "Sure. I don't know much about startups. I know how to make a business plan. This would be a great opportunity to learn." Right? So this is us back in 2012 at our booth at NYU during the semifinals of what was then the 200K Entrepreneurs Challenge. And now it's the 300K Entrepreneurs Challenge. So they still have it. I'm actually judging this very semifinal in 3 days. I'm one of the judges now. So this was us with, probably a couple months working on a business plan, and we made the semifinals. And this is us on the right about 3 months later in the finals. So we made it all the way to the finals. We got runner-up, right? So in the interim between that whole process, we got invited to this event. And I'm sure some of you heard of this. If you saw the show Silicon Valley on HBO, which was had a really strong run a few years ago. I think season 1, they include this event, and it used to be a very popular event in the startup world. Techcrunch, which many of you know is a publication, they host this semi-annual Disrupt conference. So my co-founder Ryan applied for this, and this is, again, we're full-time students, right? We had this idea, but it was more so part of a business plan competition. It was not, hey, let's make a real company out of this. But we got invited to hit the Techcrunch Disrupt stage. And by the way, on this stage where I think we made the final, and we were good at presenting, right? There on the final, I think there was about 10 finalists. I think 3 of them ended up billion-dollar-plus companies, IPO'd, billion-dollar-plus companies. This was also the beginning of what I call the golden age of startups, right? When you had lots of this huge explosion of innovation, sort of Web 2.0 meeting the shared economy, right? So you had a lot of really interesting things happening in the tech scene, but we launched a Indiegogo campaign, which is similar to Kickstarter, for this product that we were developing, which was essentially a smartphone-controlled air vent that helps you modulate your temperature and essentially have a room-by-room thermostat experience to both improve efficiency, energy efficiency, as well as improve your comfort. And that's the early sort of 3D printed prototype there on the table. And essentially, we got so much good press from this presentation. We, I think, hit our $50,000 goal on Indiegogo and decided to, upon graduation, make a real go at it and said, you know what, we'd be doing a disservice to ourselves if we didn't at least try to raise some money and form a company. So we ended up forming this smart home company called Keen Home, right, where I was fortunate to be the CEO during the tenure of the company. And the early stages were really tough, right? So we had put in about $50,000 of our own capital in order to build that prototype that I just showed you, in order to sort of just do some early feasibility studies on this super early stage product to see if it could do what we thought it could do. And then we hired a product design firm that was helping us develop the product further. It was just a team of two. We were frantically looking for a technical co-founder. And we found our technical co-founder. His name's Will McLeod. He's at Google now, through attending meetups. So we went to meetups every week in New York City. And we asked the organizers at the beginning or the end if they would allow us to speak for 30 seconds. We quickly ran up in front of whatever crowd it was and introduced what we were doing and ourselves, and said, hey, if anyone wanted to chat at the end and learn more, happy to do it. And we went to about maybe 30 of those over the course of 6 months, and ended up finding Will at one of them, and he became our third co-founder. But we still didn't have any money, right? We were running out of money. We were paying well out of our pocket. And it wasn't until Techstars, and I can't see the audience, so I would ask how many of you have heard of Techstars, raise your hands. But I'm assuming this accelerator program is somewhat, Steve raised his hand, okay. It's somewhat familiar to you. So the difference between an incubator and an accelerator is it's a finite program. Generally, they run for about 12 weeks. It's a very, very stringent acceptance rate. So I think Techstars and Y Combinator, which are clearly the top two in the world, it's right around like 2-3% get accepted, right? So every 1,000 companies, they're picking just a handful, right? So generally in Techstars, you'll have 10, right? There'll be 10 companies that are selected to attend this sort of 12-week accelerator program, and in those 12 weeks, you are surrounded by mentorship, surrounded by free labor in the form of Techstars associates who are engineers, finance people, marketing people that are there to help you accelerate the growth of your company. So what would have taken you a year to accomplish by way of traction and progress, you're able to do in about 2-3 months, just because of the resources and the education and the network that they provide to you. They really give your business a lift. They also give you $120,000, right? Which we desperately needed at that time. We had owed about $60,000 to that product design firm I was telling you about, and we were very close to shutting the company down. This was sort of our last attempt here at trying to enter into a program that came with some funding and would allow us the opportunity to go and put our best foot forward. The other thing that a brand name, so to speak, accelerator program does is it gives you a mark of credibility, right? In this day and age, there's a lot of startups, right? A lot more than 10 years ago. A lot of folks have ideas. Technology has made it such that you don't need much capital to create a website, create a landing page, draw some eyeballs to it, and see if there's any interest in what your idea is, right? So the sort of consequence of that is it's a very saturated marketplace. If you're trying to get attention for what you're doing, you're gonna have to elbow out, right, hundreds and thousands of other people, right? So what Techstars allows you to do is it gives you that stamp of credibility. It says, well, I'm a Techstars company, right? Kind of like getting a brand name diploma, right, from a good school, right? It really sets you apart. So Techstars basically gears you up. You're sort of in this bunker mentality for 12 weeks, and then at the end is what's pictured here, which is called a demo day. So you were on stage here at the end. There I'm on the left. By the way, this gentleman next to me, his name's Kurt Workman. His company IPO'd. It's a company called Outlet. He IPO'd for $1 billion about 7 or 8 months ago. And we work very closely with these other CEOs, these other companies for the 12-week program. But we're on stage. We had just presented, pitched our companies, right? And out in front of us was maybe 2,000-3,000 members of the press, investors, startup community. So it really gives you a chance on that demo day. Here's the grand unveiling of what this company has been able to accomplish in the last 12 weeks. And I would say 60 days after our demo day, we closed a $1.65 million seed financing round. So the first sort of real institutional money in the company. So it works, right? The short of it is their formula, they figured it out. They get companies funded, right? And that seed funding allowed us to build some credibility, get some press. And about a year after we raised our funding, we got contacted by a producer from ABC, right? They're always looking for high-flying companies, right? The formula of the show is they sort of a producer contacted us. We wanted to make sure that the show was structured in a way that we didn't have to give up too much royalties. The earlier iterations of the show required you to give up like a recurring percentage of your sales to ABC. And I don't think our investors really would have, nor would we have sort of entertained that structure, but they had just changed the structure. So it was a complete free and clear, right? No fees required to air on the show. So again, we tried out, right? It's similar to Techstars, similar to sort of anything you're applying to. Only this was, I think, a 0.3% chance, right? So I think there was, during our season, I think over 100,000 applicants, and they picked a few hundred, right? To actually go to Sony Studios and tape, right? So we flew out in August and taped our episode, right? It was about 2 hours in front of a camera. There's no cuts, there's no script. It was all real. And then after you tape, there's no guarantee that you'll air, right? Although we struck a deal, so we had a good inkling that we would actually air. We did a deal with Robert, as you can see here, and it was a great experience in that we were a consumer brand, right? We were a consumer company, consumer brand, and this allowed us to showcase our product and our company to about 10 million eyeballs when it first premiered, and then every time the show reran on ABC or CNBC, it was free marketing, free advertising, right? So, and I think at the time, when we shook on this deal, I think it was the 4th or 5th highest valuation in the history of the show. So we did well for ourselves. We did well for the company. And shortly thereafter, we hadn't even launched the product this time, right? So very shortly after that, we actually launched the product. This is an advertisement in CNET magazine, or one of the magazines on the left. Yeah, CNET, there you go, CNET 2016. And then this is an end cap at Lowe's, right? So we distributed the product both through our website as well as at retail. Lowe's and Best Buy were sort of our two main retailers. So in our eyes, we took an idea that was not really on the back of a napkin in a business plan competition, and just a few years later, you're sitting on a Lowe's shelf, right, all over the country. So it was really a proud moment for the entire team. We at this point raised more capital, built the team. And that's us with our second sort of where are they now that they filmed for Shark Tank. So Robert came and visited us and sort of did a company update, right? That's our office in Midtown Manhattan. Our team grew slightly more from this. So we were about 16, 17 domestically, and then we had about 50 people overseas doing manufacturing for us. And fast forward a couple of years, right? We were sort of at a crossroads, right? We had raised about $10 million at this point. We were growing, but we weren't growing as rapidly as we would have liked, right? So we sort of had this choice, and it was threefold. It was raise about $50 million more, right, to really accelerate the growth of the company to the point that was the capital injection that we needed. Two was find someone to acquire us and provide that capital injection, right, because we would be absorbed. Or three, go out of business, right? Those are really the three options that we had. So we ran a process. We reached out to all the different partners that we had, and Connect was not a partner, but they were a sort of medium-sized technology company based out of Boston, and they really liked our technology. They liked our sort of pipeline of intellectual property and other products that we had in the works, and they bought us. And I will get back to them, but first I want to show you a picture of me on the beach, because after selling the company and going on this sort of crazy ride, I had a small kid. I took a mental health break, so I took about 2-3 months off, and I think it bears noting that a lot is, especially post-COVID, right? A lot of attention, rightfully so, is placed on mental health now, and there's a lot of burnout. There's a lot of depression. There's a lot of burnout, overworking, neglect of health, family, and I'm certainly guilty of that, right? Being an entrepreneur, it's not always easy to manage work and life, right? So I did take an opportunity to travel a little bit, spend some quality time with my family, which was awesome. It was really nice. And then I kind of jumped in around the end of 2018, early 2019. I did another Techstars accelerator program. I had an idea that myself and a few other gentlemen cooked up, where we sat and we said, okay, what were some of the pain points that we felt while managing Keen Home? And one of those was how quickly we were able to develop software applications, and specifically APIs, where we would be integrating our technology with, let's say, Amazon Alexa or Google Home, or at the time Samsung SmartThings, right? We were only as effective as we could be when we integrated with a larger ecosystem in the smart home space. And that took a lot of time. And the longer that took, the longer it took for us to make a larger impact in the market, because instead of going out and selling and showing how valuable your products are within this ecosystem, you're there writing code, right? So we sort of were a little bit early on the blockchain trend, where we developed this decentralized platform. So many of you may be familiar with GitHub. It's an open source code repository, right? We essentially said, okay, look, can we make an open source function repository where the basic building blocks of code, right, can we provide in a decentralized open manner, and essentially allow any developer to write and create microservices and basically take these functions, string them together like Legos, and build code out of it. And then for these microservices that they're using on the platform, whoever's publishing those, they can get paid in either fiat or cryptocurrency, right? So we were part of Techstars' inaugural blockchain accelerator. We were coming off of a sale of a company, so we had a strong team. So we were able to raise about $500,000 in a couple of weeks from a couple of conversations. It was a lot easier the second time around. And we knew this was a big idea. We also knew it was really early, and blockchain was, it was going through its ups and downs from a volatility perspective, right? When you had Bitcoin and these other currencies sort of running up and then crashing, right? So we told ourselves, look, we'll give ourselves a year. We'll see if we can get any paying customers. We'll try to build out a community. We'll try to get publishers to publish their functions on this platform, and then build out a community of users to then use those to build and create their projects that they're working on that much faster. And we were able to get some traction, but it just wasn't enough to give us comfort that this was something that we were going to dedicate years and years to do. We were coming up against competition from AWS. They have a product called Lambda that's very similar to this, right? And we were very disciplined in running experiments. Every couple of weeks, we would run experiments and say, okay, what is the signal that we're getting? What is the noise? And the result of these experiments was telling us, look, it's going to be a struggle for you to find paying users, right? So after about a year, we shut the company down. And I was really nervous because I had never lost investor capital before, right? We took that $500,000 from outside investors. And I wrote them a memo, right, explaining to them our sort of reasoning, what we were seeing. And they were actually, to my surprise, really supportive, right? They actually came back and said, wow, this was one of the most sort of open, lucid memos that we've ever read from someone who's shutting the company down. We appreciate your candidness, and look, we'll support you in your future endeavors. So that was in just a short year, I learned probably just as much as running Keen Home for 5-6 years, right? And failure teaches you a lot. It's certainly not fun, right, to fail, but it comes with the territory, right? You're always realizing that in this sort of path of entrepreneurship, failure is more common than success, much, much more common, right? And I just happen to have it backwards, where the first company that I founded happened to be moderately successful, and then the second one was a quick failure, right? So it's very humbling, but again, you have to. It's only a true failure if you don't learn from it, right? So was able to reflect, learn, be open and honest with those that I was doing business with, and there you can see, out of business, right? Still thing to look at. I still think it was a fantastic idea, just the timing wasn't right. It was a little too early. And there we were, out of business. So while I was winding this down, the CEO of the company that bought Keen Home was staying in touch with me. I was doing a little bit of consulting for him, just here and there. He would ask me a few questions about strategy, etc. And then he started twisting my arm more aggressively and saying, "Come work for me. Let's build this thing out. Let's make this even bigger than the vision that you had." And look, the appeal for me in coming and working for him is I had been a CEO at this point for about 7-8 years, right? And this was an opportunity for me to work for. He's a brilliant guy. He'd had a long, successful career himself. He had come out of retirement to do Connect Them. He was retired from like mid 30s to late 40s. So he had earned a few $1 million by the time he was 30 years old, and sort of just hung it up and was doing some equity trading and just hanging out. And then he saw an opportunity in the sustainability space, and started Connect Them and started acquiring all these other companies and sort of built it up through acquisition. So I worked for him for the last 2 years, right, as Matt mentioned, as both the head of product and the head of corp dev, but essentially it was like the CEO's right-hand man. Really learned from a seasoned entrepreneur how to think about growing companies beyond a few $1 million, into the double-digit million revenues. Learned a lot about how to think about growth and growth via different mechanisms, growth by organic, building up a product and selling it, or growth by buying, right? Buying other companies that are already doing well. And it was a fantastic experience. And it gave me, again, an opportunity to avail myself of mentorship, right? Which I think is really important, right? It helps you sort of see where some of your weaknesses are, some of your blind spots. And it was a fantastic experience. And this is pretty much the present day. Just a few months ago, my friend Dimitri, who I was advising on this company called Arbor for the last year, twisted my arm and said, "Hey, look, you got to come and do this with me full time." So I'm the head of revenue. My good friend Dimitri is the CEO. We're a stealth mode company, and what Arbor is doing is we are a video platform for families to record their stories so they can share their oral history. So think of us like Ancestry.com meets YouTube meets Facebook, So this is going to be a big revolution in the family history space. We're very excited about it. And yeah, you won't see anything publicly from us for quite a while. We just raised some capital, and we're going to keep our heads down and try to run some experiments and figure out pricing and go to market, et cetera. But that's what I'll be working. This is what I'll be working on for the next few years here, at least, as we try to grow this company called Arbor. So with that, I know I covered a lot, but I did it in 30 minutes, which was my goal. So I'm happy about that. Love to take some questions.
Hey, thank you so much for that. And I'm going to go ahead and first off, what a journey. I know I've got questions and a whole bunch of stuff that I'd love to touch on. So let's see, everybody should have access again to the Q&A in the bottom. So I'm just going to kind of roll with these and see what comes in. So let's start here. First question is, how important are connections and alumni in entrepreneurship?
That's a great question. And I would say it's one of the most important things. And I would broaden it to just calling it your network, right? And your network is small now in the sense because you're young, right? And as you grow and as you progress and as you have more life experiences, you'll expand your network, right? So now your network is your childhood network, your high school network, and your college network, right? For the most part. Pretty soon you'll have your first job network, right? So your colleagues from that first job. If you play sports, you'll have a sports network, right? And what I always encourage people is really nurture your network, right? Take advantage of the fact that you're part of the largest alumni base in the world, right? And you're paying for that, right? As part of your tuition, you've paid for that network, access to that network. So take advantage of it, and don't just be a taker, but be a giver, right? And that's the people who maximize their networks are those that give first, right? So put yourself out there, offer mentorship, offer advice, offer sweat equity, offer cheap labor in the form of putting your skills and yourself out there, and then ask for something, right? And that's how you build authentic relationships. That's how you build sort of this credibility, right? But use LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is a fantastic platform. And as you add more people to your network, right? Maybe you'll go to grad school, that's a huge network, right? Again, your professional career, those are networks. You're going to go to different conferences and meet people, right? As part of maybe your work. Add those people to your network and check in on them, right? Every few months, pick some random people, right? Go through your list, whatever you're using, whether it's LinkedIn or whatever you use to stay organized and keep in touch with people. Just pick a few names and just ping them. Hey, it's been a while, how's it going, right? And that way you keep your network warm. So when you're ready to maybe make the next career move, maybe you're looking for a business partner, right? Maybe you're looking for some investment. You'll have these people that you sort of kept in touch with to maybe they won't help you directly. Fact is, they probably won't, but they'll maybe know somebody, right? So it's the second degree, it's the third degree. But it's very important. It's helped me immensely. I'll give you an example. As head of revenue for my current company, I'm running a program at the company where we have a goal to talk to at least 1,000 people between now and August, right? And we're doing customer discovery. So we're literally cold calling these people, but they're mostly friends and family, reaching out to them. Hey, working on something cool. Mind if I sit with you for 30 minutes and ask you some questions? And we're running a very rigorous customer discovery process where we're asking them a ton of questions about their family history, et cetera, in order to fine tune our product. And I'm leaning on my network and I'm telling my coworkers, hey, make a list of a couple hundred people that you're comfortable reaching out to that'll be happy to sit with you for 30, 45 minutes and give you some insight and information. And that comes from the power of your network, being able to just reach out to people and know that they'll make time for you.
Excellent. Thank you for that one. And let's see, any additional questions coming in here, please, again, feel free to use the Q&A section at the bottom of, wherever it is appearing on your screen in the Zoom app, and enter them whenever you'd like. So while we wait for a couple more to come in, Nayeem, a question, if I may. So entrepreneurship, the highs and the lows of life, everything that comes along. What motivates you, if I can ask, on those tough days? What keeps you going?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would lie to you that if I said every day I jump out of bed, right, like ready to go. Usually I do, right? But there are definitely those days when you're physically tired and mentally tired, right? If you've got young kids at home, well, right, a lot of times that's very exhausting and tiring. But what has always motivated me throughout my career, even before startups, was really enjoying what I did, right? I never really chose a path where I didn't fundamentally like, even when I was in finance. I really enjoyed the finance world. I loved corporate finance. I was on the path to sort of being a banker, right? I had a job offer outside when I was graduating grad school. And I would have been happy doing that, right? So I think chasing money and chasing accolades and chasing things that aren't necessarily aligned with where your passion is always going to be a mistake, right? I realize a lot of people have student debt. I had debt, right? There's this pressure a lot of times to just accept a job, right? You have to start paying some bills and paying off debt. And I'm not going to sit here and judge everyone that does that. You got to do what you got to do at some point. But if you do have the luxury of choice, really sit and ask yourself, be honest with yourself, right? Like, what would I enjoy doing? Not only that, it has to be the intersection of what you're passionate about and what you're good at.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of times what people miss also, right? Like, oh, I really like this. I really enjoy it. But maybe you're just kind of mediocre at it, right? And that's a tough thing to be honest with yourself about, right? Because nobody wants to admit to themselves that they're mediocre, right? But you do sort of have to be honest with yourself and say, okay, well, what am I really good at? What can I be world class at? Maybe if I'm not now, but what could I be world class at? And what do I enjoy doing? And if you can find that intersection and find a job that meets those two things, chances are you're going to have a lot more good days than bad days.
No, that's great. And finding that intersection, yeah, that is the tough part. And yeah, sometimes it's those down days and accepting potentially the mediocrity. Well, we've got a bunch of questions coming in now, so let's see here. I'm just going to take them in order. What is the advice that you would give to a current college students to help them in any way with their future?
That's a pretty broad question. I would say, I would say, fine. Kind of going back to what I was just saying, right? Like, everything's competitive now, right? Like, even getting your first job, right? You're going to be competing against other people for however many slots that company's hiring for. And as you progress throughout your career, you're going to face that same level of, or even more, right? Because there's less spots. As you get more and more senior, there's less available spots, right? There's this many analysts, this many associates, this many VPs, right? And this many managing directors, right? So what sets people apart, at least in I should say in most industries, is they're displaying some sort of additional passion or additional interest beyond just their grades and their project that they're doing at work, right? So when I interview people, for example, right, let's say I'm hiring for an engineering role and I've got 10 engineers that I have to talk to over the next couple of weeks, right? I'm going to know that if they're made it to the point where they're sitting in my office and talking to me, they all have good grades. They all have a decent work experience, right? They all have a base level of aptitude, right? So what is setting them apart? So I ask them, hey, forget about engineering. What are some cool projects that you're working on, like in your personal life? Do you have a blog? Do you like building race cars and racing them on the weekend? Like what gets you out of bed from just a passion perspective? And a lot of folks would be like, right? Like, I don't want to work with those people, right? Because, hey, you may be a great engineer, but in this day and age, what is that extra thing that you're bringing to the table? Because everybody's a great engineer, right? Like, we're going to assume that, right? So the best thing you can do is like figure out stuff that you like that's kind of adjacent to what your job is, and like put yourself out there, like write something, right? Like, and it doesn't even have to be like direct. Maybe you love music, right? And you're also working on music, right? Part-time, right? For an employer, that stuff is like super interesting because it shows that you're like a well-rounded person, and it shows that you're like bringing a level of passion and interest to the table that is going to make any team better, right? Like, you have to be both interested in what you're doing, and you have to be interesting as a person. So focus on being interested, asking good questions, being curious, and focus on being interesting as an individual. Like, make yourself interesting enough where you can meet somebody at an airport, at a cocktail party, and you have stuff to talk about with them. Maybe you've traveled a lot, right? Those are things that you can do. You can focus on beyond just doing your homework and getting good grades and getting internships and getting jobs. Those sort of extra things will help set you apart.
That's awesome. Great advice. And when we think about kind of setting yourself apart, one of the questions, actually, great segue, is do you have any suggestions for creating an online presence, monitored social media, LinkedIn, personal websites, etc., for networking and career development?
Yeah, I think it's really important. Like, I lean into LinkedIn a lot. I really like LinkedIn. I'm not a big Instagram or Facebook user, right? But I'll make sure I have a profile on LinkedIn that, if I was in Forbes magazine, or if I got coverage here, I'll put a link to there. I have 5 different patents that I've been granted, so I'll put the information there, right? So whatever achievements that, and I'm sure you guys will go on and have awesome achievements. I can't wait to hear about you guys in the news and the companies that you guys start. Some of you, you want to have a bulletin board somewhere where you are putting that stuff out there, and you don't have to feel like it's bragging, right? There's professional ways to do it. But yeah, I think it is important to, in this day and age, a lot of times, right, when you're applying for something, you're getting Googled, right? And that's both for good and bad things, right? They're going to Google you, and whatever tweet you made when you were drunk when you were 16 years old, you better hope that's not visible, right? So there's 2 sides of it, right? There's creating an online presence that pumps you up, and then making sure that you're putting out positive energy into the interwebs, right? There isn't stuff there that employers or anybody's going to flag and say, like, I don't know about this person, right? So you do want to be careful. Again, just put out positivity. If any achievements that you have or certifications, and like, look, I put my PADI scuba diving license on my LinkedIn because that's a passion of mine. That's an interest of mine. And if somebody meets me in an interview and wants to talk about scuba diving with them, I can tell them about the dive sites that I've been to all over the world. And you never know, right, where different intersections of passion and interest may lead you in commonality with somebody else. So I definitely encourage you guys to, and I don't want to say that LinkedIn is the be all end all, right? Like, if you've got 100,000 Instagram followers, and I had a designer that worked for me once that had over 200,000 Instagram followers, and she was like a travel blogger in her part-time, and got paid to travel all over the world and promote different hotels and swimsuit companies, etc. Right? Like, I thought that was super cool. I actually didn't even realize it until she was already working for me. She didn't necessarily wear it on her sleeve, but that's something that if that is something that you've been able to build up a following, right, or a community, absolutely sort of use that to your benefit where you can, for sure.
No, that's great. We've actually had some students where it's like, oh, hold on, I'm going to put that on Instagram, and they're like, oh, look, 8,000 people. You're going, wait, what, who, how? And yeah, it's out there. Take that opportunity. So
absolutely.
You were just given some really great advice. What's the best piece of advice that you've been given?
I've been given a lot of good advice, man. Let's see, from a hiring perspective, the best advice that I was recently given is, when you're looking to hire people, don't try to turn their, and a lot of folks, you're given this tip, oh, turn your weakness into your strength, right? Like, during the interview process, when you're looking to work with people and hire people and build people up as a leader, it's very difficult to try to turn their weaknesses into strength. Instead, focus on people's strengths and focus on augmenting and amplifying those strengths. So that was something that, it's not necessarily intuitive. A lot of times you're like, well, I'm going to make you better here, right? A lot of times you can spin your wheels as a leader trying to do that. The other piece of advice that I was given by one of my mentors, and that I always give now, is it's better to have a hole on your team than an asshole, right? And what I mean by that is when you hire and when you're building up something, culture is very important, right? What are the values that you stand for, right, as a human being? And you should be trying to work with, work for, right? It doesn't you don't need to be the CEO, but pay very close attention to what does this company stand for? What are their values, right? Putting on a CEO hat, a lot of times you have this pressure. Oh, I got all this stuff I need to do. I need to hire all these people. Otherwise, we're wasting time. We're wasting time. But if you hire the wrong people, the a-holes, right? They may be more damaging than that hole that you had on your team, right? Because they may have such a bad atmosphere, create such a bad atmosphere, and have such a bad attitude that they'll drag other people down and actually reduce net productivity. So I think taking a step back, it's always important as you go out in your careers and you're looking at different companies. Maybe you're lucky enough to have 2, 3, or 4 different job offers, right? And maybe one pays a little bit more, maybe one has a little bit more benefits, maybe one has a better commute or lets you work remotely, right? Don't ignore the culture of the company. Really pay close attention to what are these people like, right? Like try to talk to as many people as you can, right? Try to go out for a beer, go out for a coffee with them, right? Just try to get to know them, right? Because these are the folks you're going to spend more time with these folks in your work than your family, than anybody else, right? So, it's really important to obviously, like I said, not only enjoy what you're doing, right? Make sure that you can be world class at it, but whatever environment you're putting yourself in, that it's like supporting who you want to be as a human being, and it's something that you're proud of to be. These people you should be proud of to associate with. There's nothing worse, and believe me, I was fortunate. So many of my friends had terrible managers, terrible bosses, and there's nothing worse than that. My roommate, first job out of college, he was working at Royal Bank of Canada in on Wall Street, making more money than me, more prestigious job. I was at Prudential out in Newark, New Jersey, but he was miserable. His boss was just a terrible person, verbally abused him all the time, and none of it mattered, right? Like none of it mattered because he wasn't in an environment that he was proud of. So definitely don't neglect that. Make sure that you really scrutinize heavily the culture of the organization you're going to be joining.
Again, great advice. And I'll have to share with my students an article about there that really speaks to don't hire a-holes and really how bad it can be. It really, that's Absolutely. Something we always want to watch out for. So Absolutely. If we think about common mistakes and other stuff, what might be, some common mistakes you see early entrepreneurs make?
Yeah. So a common mistake that I made and that I see a lot of people making is trying to raise money too early, right? Because that's always a forcing function is, well, shoot, I need money to do most of the things I want to do. I'm only one person. I need to hire people. I need to pay for X, Y, and Z, right? So your instinct is a lot of times going to be, well, let me go and talk to some investors and put my company out there. But the reality is, especially now, like I said, it's a very saturated market, right? So investors are getting bombarded with companies every day. They get hundreds and hundreds of slide decks that let's be real, 98% of them they don't even open. Like they'll just delete the email, right? So you have to there's an art to reaching out to people, going through the sort of rounds of presentations and meetings, and again going back to network, right? The way that you don't get your deck deleted from an inbox is you get a warm introduction, right? So you have to take the time to say, okay, who is this investor? Do I know them directly? If so, great, then they're not going to ignore you. But chances are you won't, right? But maybe you have a connection like me who might know them. Maybe you look on LinkedIn and say, oh, Nayeem knows this person. And you'll message me and say, hey, Nayeem, this is my name. Can we have a call? Can I explain to you what I'm doing? Then I'll jump on a call with you. You'll pitch me. And then I'll say, okay, that's a cool idea. Hey, by the way, I noticed that you were friends with Matt Withheiler from Flybridge Capital. Can you introduce me to Matt? And then I would say yes, I would say no, or I would say maybe, right? If it's a yes, then I would do an introduction. I would say, hey, Matt, meet Bob. right? Bob's working on this cool company. I think you should meet with them. I think it would be great for your investment, your firm, right? And then Matt's going to not ignore you. But just that whole process that I just laid out, just to talk to Matt, that might have taken you weeks, right? And of real effort. Rather, you could have cold emailed Matt, right, on LinkedIn, and you probably would have been ignored, right? And then you sort of kind of burn that opportunity, right? So you have to kind of be really like purposeful with how you're doing these things, right? And remember, Matt's one investor. If you wanted to speak to 50 investors, you have to find 50 warm introductions to those 50 people, right? And chances are, if you're raising money, you're going to want to speak to at least 50 to 100 investors, because you'll probably get no's from about 90 of them and maybe yeses from 10 of them if you're lucky, right? So a lot of folks tend to just like ignore the reality of that and just go and start to have all these conversations because they feel like they're busy, they're doing activities, they're sending emails out, having conversations, but it's not like well thought out activity. It's just activity. And oftentimes that leads to no money, right? And then what happens is you have no money, you've like already tapped all of these, connections or these investors on the shoulder, and maybe some of them met with you, some of them have said no. So then it's like, well, who am I going to talk to at this point? And then the investors that you have spoken to, they're all kind of, maybe you do find a new investor, but then he'll kind of speak to the other ones that you've already spoken to, and they're like, we passed on that deal 6 months ago, right? So then you kind of have this like zombie company. And this happened to Keenhome, right? We tried to raise money right after Techcrunch Disrupt, right? We said, all right, look, we did a $50,000 crowdfunding campaign. We did, NYU, Techcrunch Disrupt, let's do it. And we fell on our faces, right? Like we didn't have the network that we needed. We didn't have the credibility that we needed. We didn't have the traction that the company needed to get people interested. And we went like 6 months thereabouts with, completely blanking. And like I said, it was really that getting into Techstars was sort of our last, half court heave, right? If not for that, it gave us a chance to reset, right? Give us a chance to reset, hunker back down, actually build a stronger business. So then when we hit that demo day stage, we had a $1.5 million contract from Lowe's in hand that said, hey, look, this is a retailer that believes in us. They're going to stock us on their shelves. This is why you should invest in us, right? But we made a mistake that many people do of just like hitting the streets, right? Like doing all these activities, making yourself feel like you're really busy, but not having like a well thought out strategy. And a lot of times that leads to, very, very weak results.
Yeah, and this idea of the warm introduction, right? So you're not cold calling, you're not just, being deleted, etc. So when we think about that warm introduction, one of these questions that just looking through the list here, if we think about those soft skills that are needed for something like that, what would you recommend to college students to help them, what soft skills might they need or that they should work on while they're in college to help them, break through some of those warm introductions?
Yeah. So, again, lean on your alumni network, right? Your alumni network is sort of like a cheat code, right? Because these are folks that just by virtue of having the same name on their diploma, they're probably going to be a little bit more amenable to you just kind of reaching out to them. And play the student card, right? Like I've had so many students reach out to me over the last 10 years that I probably would have ignored had I not felt like I would be a dick for doing that, right? Because they're saying, hey, look, I'm a student. Right? I'm trying to learn about this. I would love to grab you for 20 minutes. I usually say yes, right? I'll be honest. Like I'm pretty busy. I have a lot of commitment, but I usually will say, and if they're a Penn State student, chances are I'll say yes even more. So play the advantages that you have by virtue of being a Penn State student. A. B is use the programs and the clubs and the like co-op programs, and there's all sorts of opportunities at Penn State. Like I did a J&J co-op back 15 years ago. That was like the hot internship to do is do a J&J co-op, right? And it was competitive, right? Like I remember, I think I was a junior, right? And there was like a mixer, right? So J&J came and they had this mixer, and it's kind of like a little cocktail thing, and you had to go, and every J&J representative had like a line of people waiting to talk to them, right? And it was a little bit awkward because when your chance came, you're like, right? But the only way to get better at situations like that is to just put yourself in them, right? And just sort of learn, right? Be like, hey, why was that awkward? And it sometimes stinks, right? But there's definitely opportunities while in school to try to kind of put yourself in these real world situations where if you can sort of get some practice at, kind of cold meeting people, getting them interested in you, right? And that goes back to what I was saying before. It's like, what is interesting about you, right? And sort of trying to find some commonality with that other person, right? Maybe they like hunting, maybe they like fly fishing, like whatever it is, right? And then it all goes back to like kind of honing those conversation skills, right? Being charming, right? Being persuasive, right? Looking in front of a mirror. What does my smile look like? Does it look weird? Do I look creepy, right? Like figuring out what makes you disarming and attractive, not necessarily from a romantic perspective. What's going to attract someone to you? What is your magnetism? And then that will help you build your network, right? Because you're going to build your authentic network. You're going to put yourself out there and help other people without expecting anything in return. And if you can do that all through college, and you'll have people in your corner. So then when you're looking to get those warm introductions, et cetera, you can like sit with somebody. It can be an alumni from Penn State that's never heard of you before. But if you can snag them for 20, 30 minutes, you're gonna explain to them why they should care about talking to you and why they should help you. And then one thing can lead to another, and maybe you'll get an introduction from them. And you also have to deal with rejection, right? Because that whole thing I just laid out, maybe you're gonna do that 9 times or 10 times, and 8 times you're gonna fall on your face and you're gonna get ignored. So don't be discouraged by it. That's the other thing, right? Is like stay persistent, learn from, okay, why am I getting ignored? Well, maybe I'm saying something in a weird way. Maybe it's confusing. Maybe I'm talking too much, right? So like having self-awareness, right? My wife, she's an executive at a pharmaceutical company, and she's interviewing she reports to the CEO. It's a small biotech company, and she's interviewing for her boss, right? The CMO of the company. She'll eventually report to the chief medical officer. So she's part of the search process for the CMO candidate. And I can't tell you, and these are folks that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, multimillionaires, very successful careers. And she'll talk to some of them, and it'll be like a 45-minute call, and they'll talk for like 43 minutes, right? Like no self-awareness of like, and she's like, why would I want to work for someone like that? Right? That all they want to do is talk, right? Like they're not displaying the flexibility where there's a give and take, right? So you'd be surprised how some people who, even if they're successful, they still lack a lot of self-awareness. So a lot of the reality of success is like being really honest with yourself and saying like, look, why am I failing here? Like, why am I coming up short? Right? Like, what can I improve on? Right? Well, ask your friends, ask your relatives, like, hey, when I explain this to you, is it persuasive? Is it compelling? Right? Solicit feedback, take the feedback with low ego, and try to improve. Right? And that'll help you get a better network. That'll help you tap that network and have that network work for you and help you get those introductions, et cetera.
That's great advice, and also speaks to that idea of, sometimes your weaknesses might need to stay weaknesses, but focus on those really good things that you can do and get that out there. And, that's something we learn over time. So when we think, and that actually answered a couple of the other questions that were floating in the Q&A, but when we think maybe about the networking, this is a great question, maybe 2 parts here. Do you think the network you gained during your MBA was the most valuable benefit to you? If not, what was? Let's start with that one.
Yeah, and I'm sure many of you have heard this, right? It's not a secret that part of your grad school, whether it's an MBA or something else, part of what you're paying for is the network, right? And if you go to a sort of a brand name program, right, oftentimes the network will be stronger, right? And it's true, right? I can attest to that. My friends that went to, second or third tier MBA programs, they're not as close or as they're not benefiting as much from a network from a stronger tier program. So, and that's not, I'm not trying to cast aspersions. I'm just saying, if you can get into a top tier program in anything, right? Doesn't have to be school. Obviously you want to strive for that, because it's top tier for a reason, right? It's not just, it's achieving that status for some reason, right? And part of that reason is obviously the caliber and the strength of your peers and your faculty, right? A lot of times your faculty will be, like my faculty, half the faculty that was teaching me was like on CNBC, like later that evening, being interviewed for something, because these are thought leaders that people all over the world want to hear their opinions on stuff. And I'm lucky enough that they're lecturing me and I can go and have a conversation with them after class, right? So absolutely the strength of the network at NYU sort of helped me be where I am today. I'll give you an example. NYU itself invested $150,000 in my first company. They had a fund. It was like a brand new fund that many people didn't even know about because it was so new back in 2013 and 14. And I happened to find out who was running it, a gentleman by the name of Frank Romalowski, and he wasn't the friendliest guy initially, and I sort of stayed persistent and got on his good side, and ultimately he ended up cutting a check out of that new fund to capitalize my company, right? Not many schools would do that, right? Not only did NYU invest in my company, they gave me free office space for about a year, right? And office space in New York City is not cheap, right? So they supported me with free office space. They supported me with funding. I also hired a ton of kids from NYU and Columbia. I was involved in a number of fellowship programs. So my company would be the company that's part of this fellowship program. So NYU and Columbia would assign me interns every few quarters that have to participate in this program. And I was like the company partner, right? So I got awesome labor from NYU also. Labor, capital, mentorship, office space, right? So absolutely, they've been very supportive of me, and a big part of that is definitely like the strength of my fellow classmates and my faculty, for sure.
No, it does make quite the difference, especially when you think, yes, you're in the top tier, and the students now that you're getting are in the top tier coming into. Really fantastic.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And obviously, I met my co-founder at NYU. I'm remiss to say that the gentleman I built my company with was a classmate, right? Mm-hmm. He was a classmate of mine. Mm-hmm. So, and him and I we'll do some sort of business for the rest of our lives together, whether it's companies or investing or something. But that was certainly a testament to the strength of the student body.
Mm-hmm. And let me ask you this, related to that question, is do you have any advice for students looking to enter a program that's similar to Stern?
Yeah, and a lot of it, I don't want to sound like a broken record, but anytime you're applying for anything, right? It's what is that? What you're going to write essays, you're going to do interviews, right? Any top tier, anything that you're going to apply to, and it could be an accelerator program. It could be a school thing. It could be a sports team, right? They're going to want to, you could be the best athlete in the world, but you could be a cancer in that locker room, right? If they get a sense of that, if the coach gets a sense of that, you're out, right? So similarly, and a lot of these programs, they're especially now, a lot of them have a very heavy interview component, right? So it's not just your GPA, it's not just your transcript, right? And a resume. It's all right, jump on a Zoom with me, or let's come into the campus and sit with me for 45 minutes, right? So, you really got to refine your interpersonal skills. Warren Buffett, right? One of the most successful investors in the history of the world, right? His number one skill that when asked is communication, right? He's people ask him all the time, oh, Warren, what makes a successful business person? And he'll tell you all day long, communication. Right. So you got to refine your communication skills. That's how you verbally communicate, how you write. Right. So, are these things that you're working on? Right. Are you actively writing? Right. Or is it just text messages with bad spelling and right. Written and verbal communication when you're applying to things. Right. It's there's nothing more important than that. Right. I can't tell you how many people that have written me a cover letter or an email, and it's just atrocious, right? from a spelling, from a grammar, from a you name it, right? So these are things that and I'm not saying like just be a decent writer. I'm saying if you're a good writer, if you're a great writer, people will like stop like, oh, that was refreshing to read, right? Like if you can write something that's persuasive, compelling, interesting, brief, brevity, right? It's not 18 paragraphs, right? But you're getting what you need to say, you're getting to the point, but in a way that's delightful for people. That will set you apart. And it sounds like super simple, but it takes time and effort and practice. And sadly, I think as the generations go by, especially written communication is a little bit more of a rare trait. But if you can hone that, it'll serve you really well.
Excellent advice. And I know we're getting up against time right now. So why don't we make this maybe the last question? And let me ask you this, Nayeem. You have a lot of students here joining us today. Let's pretend younger Nayeem was in this audience right now. What advice would you give your younger self in parting?
Man, younger Nayeem sitting there, huh? Look, I would tell him to just go out and be bold, be brave, right? Life is tough, life is not easy, right? Maybe the color of your skin, maybe where you're from, maybe your upbringing, right? Like not everyone has sort of all the advantages, right? I certainly didn't have all the advantages, right? But have faith in yourself. And just tell yourself that you can do it, and go out there and do it. But it has to come from within. Like it can't come from externally, like your parents can only do so much, right? Your friends can only do so much to boost you up. You have to have that belief from within you that, look, you can do it, right? Whatever it is you want to do. Again, you have to be honest with yourself, right? Like, is it something that you can excel at? But if you told yourself yes, the only person holding you back at that point will be you. So that's what I would tell myself.
Well, it's hard to top that. And in conclusion, truly, Nayeem, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with everyone today. I can't thank you enough for this. We know you're busy. We know your passion for education for students and for Penn State. So truly, thank you so much for this. It's been fantastic.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. It was super fun. Thank you, Peggy. I wish you all the best of luck, truly. Have a great rest of the next couple months. And for those of you who are graduating, congratulations. Go out and do great things, guys.